I ended up becoming the new ruler of the Spell Kingdom. Co-ruler, that is. Faye initially hated the idea, but after I made it very clear that I'd long since forgiven her prior behavior, she finally agreed to rule the kingdom with me. I mean, both of us saved our people from Seaber. It would have been unfair if I didn't offer that to her. I also thought having two rulers would be a good way to keep things balanced, avoiding extremes in policies and all that. I couldn't have been more wrong. Almost immediately after she assumed her new role, Faye tried to push a very, very progressive attitude regarding sex onto our people. She thought that sex nullified stress and encouraged others to express their sexuality. She likely had this viewpoint due to her promiscuous nature, even before we went to the future. I wasn't having any of that, though. I felt that sex was a selfish act. It was all about what you wanted, ignoring the needs of the other person involved. And I wanted a society full of positive group mentalities, with people doing kind acts for one another, passing it forward. Intercourse was for procreation only. It had no place in everyday life. But Faye didn't back down. She started personally sleeping with large groups of people, converting them into sexual deviants. She claimed that any repression of sexual expression would lead us right down the same path the worm ended up on. Publicly, I couldn't challenge my co-ruler, not blatantly at least. The most I did was to hold rallies that would offer an alternative, abstinent way of life, neither protesting nor encouraging Faye's actions. Privately, however, I made a bet with her. I agreed to let her convert people, but if the populace did turn selfish, then Faye would let me enact my own sexual behavior policies instead. Things seemed fine at first. As the months went on, though, Faye became more extreme in her actions. In turn, my rallies became more blatantly biased. Neither of us wanted a future where we became like the worm again, of course. We were both so convinced that each other's ideals were in the wrong, and so we went above and beyond to prove it. The populace, and us two as rulers, had become divided. Faye and I ignored everything except this single topic. We'd become obsessed over it. Luckily, Vi and the Celobst Emperor sabotaged everything. For those who were in my camp, the two of them easily seduced them all, either with their bodies or with science, facts, and logic. And for those who were in Faye's group, it only took a little intimidation to get them to agree to abstinence. After all, sex came with relationship drama and physical exhaustion, both of which were highly stressful. These results showed that both of our philosophies weren't absolute. People needed some sex, but they shouldn't center their lives around it either. Faye and I thus agreed to let the populace do as they wished regarding sexual activities. However, said populace was severely psychologically damaged from the policy whiplash that Vi, the Emperor, Faye, and myself had inflicted on them. On top of that, we'd ignored practically every other aspect of our kingdom's needs, leading to widespread health, social, and many, many other issues. To make matters worse, everywhere outside of our kingdom had blacklisted our citizens from traveling to their lands. They claimed that such mentally unstable people would pose a threat to their respective peoples. With our kingdom already feared by many thanks to the powers Faye and I now possessed, that was all the excuse they needed to restrict us. It only made sense to them that if our people were so unstable, then we as leaders must be the same. They weren't wrong. Us two, as leaders, were screw-ups. But we refused to let our people be punished for that. We were determined to turn things around. And after 10 years, we did just that. Vi, the Emperor, Faye, and I had worked tirelessly to heal our populace's mental health while encouraging them to bestow kindness onto others. As a result, the Spell Kingdom was begrudgingly removed from the global blacklist imposed on us a decade ago. Soon thereafter, our people started visiting these other regions, which caused things to loosen up even more. We had cultivated an enlightened, kind, giving mindset within our people. Their progressive attitudes quickly won over many. There was an unintended side effect, however. An underground sexual revolution had begun brewing, encouraging people to find sexual equilibrium within their lives. It wasn't long until it became a mainstream belief. Within a year, Vi, the Emperor, Faye, and I had become the icons of this new revolution. We leaned into this unintentional result. The world was mainly at peace because of how people perceived us, so who were we to ruin that? Well, over the next 30 years, we realized that we were, in fact, the ones to ruin that. While Faye and I had compromised regarding sexual mores, there was still lots we disagreed on. Throw in the opinions of Vi and the Emperor, and the tension between the four of us slowly grew, year after year. We kept up an idealistic appearance for the public, but behind closed doors, the tiniest issues caused arguments. By 1041 AD, the four of us had went our separate ways. The three of them went to separate corners of the globe, while I stayed in my kingdom. Each of them continued to spread their own philosophies in their given regions. For me, I just stuck to focusing on the well-being of my people. Surprisingly, despite the four of us having broken up and new conflicting ideals sprouting up by the day, the world continued to enjoy peace. Mostly. This was likely due to the sexual progressiveness continuing to flourish globally, keeping any wars or great tragedies from happening. What we couldn't have foreseen, though, was the population increasing dramatically. At first, I was able to use the fragment tech embedded in me to speed up crop growth, feeding an ever-growing populace. Years later, I sought out Vi to see if she could help with any tech she might have had, but I couldn't find her. Same for the Emperor. That meant I had to resort to asking Faye for help. Shockingly, she had mellowed out in the time we'd spent apart, so she readily agreed. Yet it still wasn't enough. We'd already destroyed Seeber's suit, so the only option left was to dig up the fragments themselves, which we did. Luckily, it worked. The fragments gave us enough power to stabilize things. Until Faye and I both passed, that is. Just 1 year after that, in 1149 AD, the population had hit 3 billion and counting. You'd think everything would have broken down soon thereafter, right? Well, it didn't. There were still no wars for at least the next 400 or so years. That doesn't mean the people didn't suffer, though. They somehow never figured out how to use the fragments. So, as resources dwindled, a lot of them, yeah. That's my story. It wasn't perfect, but I think we did the best with the time we had. We got humanity to embrace kindness, at the very least. So, there's no way they'll end up like the worm, right? You'd think I would have ended up ruling the kingdom, right? Nope. But get this, the chump didn't take the position either, and that's because she told everyone that the only person fit to rule was that freaking Salad Stepper! She said that because he's so different from us, if he was our ruler, then we'd all eventually accept differences between one another. At first, I thought she was crazy. Later on, though, I found out her real motives. Oh shit, I'm getting ahead of myself here. I almost forgot the most important part of this story. The holographic clones of herself. She really wanted to spread kindness all around the world, so she decided to do it literally. She gave them a little bit of fragment energy so that they could have their own free will. Then she sent them all out on mission work. They preached the idea of kindness. Personally, I thought that was some creepy shit, but hey, it worked. People started becoming nicer, which is good and all, I guess. Let's get back to the whole reason that she had the Emperor ruling us all, though. The Slots were in a pretty tight ship. They knew where any member of their clan was at any time, and they especially kept tabs on Emperors, because they couldn't fly their ships without them. So when one of them turned up in 1000 AD, they went bonkers. Within a month, we already had a few visitors from their homeworld. Unsurprisingly, I capitalized on this and named herself the liaison between humans and these alien visitors. Gotta admit, I respect that kind of hustle. That's why when Dahlia told me in private about her real intent, I had to respect how manipulative she'd also been with the whole "the Emperor is the best ruler" thing. Turns out right after defeating Seabird, she sent a message into space encouraging aliens to come visit us. I helped out, so that's how she was so ready to accept the aliens. She knew they were coming. Talia told me that she believed humanity would benefit from the scientific advancements of these aliens, but that wasn't her main reason for doing this. Oh no. That crazy chump. Heck, I can't even call her that for this one. She said that if humans were encountering all these different species, that humans should quickly realize how they acted then would influence how they were perceived later, once humanity made it out into space. On top of that, she believed that making alliances with aliens this early on in human history would prevent us from running out of resources in the future, avoiding another worm-like outcome for Earth. She wasn't wrong. And that's what frustrated me so much back then. She was a chump, an inferior fighter, an inferior tactician, and yet somehow she grabbed all the fragments, discovered Seaver's deception, and now she'd come up with this admittedly smart plan. She'd beaten me, and back then I couldn't take that. We were both respected and revered across the land. People worshipped us, really, as heroes, as equals. In my mind, though, I wasn't her equal. I was her better. That's why, soon after she told me the truth, something in me just snapped. I had to get one up on her somehow. So I did. You remember those holograms she sent out all over the place? They had fragment energy in them. So did I. I only needed one of the holograms to tap into the entire network. Once I was in, I knew exactly how to humiliate her. See, even before we went to the future, I was pretty good at getting what I wanted out of people. Had to be, since I'd been cursed with. Well, that's not an issue anymore, luckily. So I knew instinctively that what people fear the most is the unknown, the lack of knowing if something's a threat or not. And thanks to Talia, those holograms had enough free will to feel fear. They set their knowledge of all alien species to be null, meaning they could no longer comprehend their existence. From their perspectives, they were indescribable. Almost instantly, collectively, all the holograms had nervous breakdowns. They were unusable. Finally, I'd proven what exactly. I hadn't beaten Talia. I'd only beaten some holograms. They were frustrated. I rubbed my victory in the chump's face, hoping it'd bring me the vindication I wanted. It didn't. She just made me feel even worse when she forgave me of all things. I was at my breaking point. I didn't know what else to do. So I told her the truth. I told her that I wanted to beat her ass, one-on-one, to finally prove who was the best between us. To my surprise, she agreed. She had one caveat, though. We had to fight without using our fragment powers, and she didn't want to cause damage to any of the nearby villages. I would have suggested it myself if she didn't, for a different reason. I wanted this fight to be purely our own skills and strength. Nothing more. So we fought, and I won, effortlessly. At the time, it was the most important thing in the world to me. I'd finally proven to everyone that I was the superior, the better of the two of us heroes. Now, it just seems kind of silly. With it out of my system, the tension had vanished between Talia and I. It took a few days to heal up, and then everything was back to normal. Over the next few decades, Talia and I would continue sparring every so often, but now it was a friendly rivalry, purely for entertainment. Besides that, for the rest of our lives, nothing as eventful as the whole Seaver incident ever happened again. The both of us lived far longer than the average person, thanks to the fragment tech having merged with our bodies. However, we weren't immortal. We both passed away by 1223 AD.
Apparently, the Chunk's philosophy of kindness and her attempts to make Earth into an alien hotspot both stuck around for a few centuries afterwards. Oh, right, about Vi. She actually passed away long before us, leaving behind lots of gadgets and gizmos. The people had already integrated her tech into society by the time Talia and I passed. As for the Celot's Emperor, he went back home sometime in the 1300s. After he left, humanity no longer had any of us freaks of nature around to defend it from threats. After all I've seen, though, I'm sure they'll be fine without us. Wait, what? Are you serious? Talia, that chump! That idiot! She didn't kill Sieber? She just left him in stasis? Even if it's running off that blue stuff, it won't last forever! I need to... Oh. Alright, I'll trust you then.
And now, today's top story. The death centennial of our tragic pioneer, Talia. For most of her life, she was a pariah to humanity, scorned for her apparent misdeeds, villain to multiple generations. If not for the awakening of 1198, well, that's getting ahead of things. Let's go back to the beginning of it all. The year after Talia and her respected confidant, Faye, had defeated the sinister despot, Sieber. Talia, with good intentions, desired to allow humanity to connect to one another on a deeper level than they'd ever been able to before. So, using her fragment powers, she redesigned the brain of a willing man who had been having marital troubles. The result? He could now perceive and comprehend all intimate emotions emanating from those nearby. More specifically, this man would now automatically feel the same physical and mental sensations of arousal and affection that others around him felt. Talia did this because she believed the easiest way to understand someone would be to bond with them sexually. To her, the best way to do that would be to feel as they felt, to expose ourselves to each other like never before. The man reported back to her weeks later that her prediction was indeed correct. His relationship and quality of life had dramatically improved, giving Talia incentive to expand this treatment to others. After a few months, she had altered the entire population of not just her kingdom, but all the surrounding areas as well. At first, things were wonderful. Sexual equality and gender freedoms became widespread within mere months. While there was some societal upheaval for a short period of time, it quickly settled. Feeling confident from this rousing success, Talia decided to go a step further. She wanted to apply a second alteration to those already treated. With the help of her technology officer Vi and the Celot's Emperor of the Earth, she was able to supercharge her fragment powers beyond allowing only intimacy to be felt. A handful of already altered humans volunteered for the second alteration. Upon completion, they were now capable of sensing the entire spectrum of emotions from nearby people. Talia thought this was the natural next level of things. If catering to another person's intimacy alone helped interpersonal relationships, then being able to cater to all their emotional needs must be even better. However, there was a significant dissenter in regards to expanding this second alteration any further. Faye. She tried her best to convince Talia that sensing everything from everyone all the time would cause societal collapse. Her advice was ignored, of course. And while a small handful of civilians were on the fence about the procedure, eventually everyone who had agreed to the first alteration agreed to undergo the second as well. The day of the second alteration arrived. Vi and the Emperor were on hand to assist. Faye, however, was nowhere to be seen. In fact, records show that after voicing her dissent, she was never seen from again. Did she somehow know the disaster soon to be inflicted on the whole of humanity? Or, as some have speculated, perhaps she even had a hand in causing it. Conjecture aside, It was a day that many of our ancestors would surely never forget. Talia's alteration, meant to only be inflicted on those willingly following her, was instead inflicted on the entirety of humanity. Immediately realizing her mistake, she tried her best to undo things, but it was impossible. Reverting a person's brain back to its original state caused catastrophic brain damage. That was the first thing Lucky Volunteer found out. All she could do was look on in horror at the outcome of her attempt to help others. Her attempt at bestowing kindness on humanity. Within hours, chaos swallowed the planet. The overload of emotional perception was too much for most to bear. Many succumbed to ego death, having their own desires and feelings overridden by those nearby. Jealousy, hatred, and frustration ran rampant. Depression afflicted scores of people, as if it were a plague, and violent crimes were commonplace in broad daylight. Positive emotions were just as dangerous. Large droves of people would blissfully ignore all responsibilities, and actual laughter epidemics popped up once in a while. Sadly, both Vi and the Emperor of Earth lost their lives in the insanity that unfolded within those first few days. Finally, the last sliver of hope for humanity was dashed, and they were made aware of a nightmarish revelation. The brain alterations were hereditary. Time, nor anything else, would offer an escape from this new reality. Homo sapiens had become Homo sensu. Decades passed by. After bolstering their mental strength, society had slowly came to grips with the situation. The chaos had settled down. For a time, they even thrived, with true understanding between people becoming the norm. But humans enjoy mystery. They enjoy the unknown. With everything about each other already known, they stagnated. There was no purpose in doing anything for anyone because everyone already knew each other's needs. Nothing was special. Nothing was important. Humanity had received their pleasure before their work, their reward before earning it. They had no more reason to try for anything. Soon, motivation to improve oneself for others vanished. Then, the motivation to improve anything for anyone, even themselves, vanished as well. It was now 1100 AD, 100 years since Talia's mistake. Humanity would need to endure another 98 years of this stagnation until the Zealots returned to Earth in the event we would come to call the Awakening of 1198. Drawn in by the mass of collective psychic energy ebbing from the planet, they landed in the middle of a small town square near where the Spell Kingdom once existed. Stunned at what they were seeing, they landed on the surface to get a first-hand look at these new humans. And that's when humanity had their first mystery. Nearly 200 years. This loss couldn't be read by humans. Similarly, this loss had never encountered a species with psychic energy to rival their own. They were as fascinated as the humans were. Now that it had a viable target, the deeply buried intimacy that Talia had instilled in humanity so long ago was beginning to rear its head again. Within the next few years, the Zealots and humans became obsessed with one another. Most of them willingly underwent gene alterations to become biologically compatible with one another. The two species became closer physically and mentally. Talia herself came out of her self-imposed, century-long exile to heavily endorse this revitalization of the people, continuing to campaign for it right up until her death, 1235 AD. There are those who say she did it to improve her image in the history books. Others say she did it to ease the burden on her conscience. Suppositions. As the generations passed by, a new era of true happiness, kindness, and hope had covered the planet. By 1300 AD, the Earth had become widely populated, not only with humans and Zealots, but with hybrids of the two species as well. By yet another miracle, these hybrids were universally emperors. Despite originally being the rarest variant of Sloths, they were also integral for navigation of their spaceships. The Sloths worked tirelessly day and night to build as many spaceships as they could, so as to give this new surplus of Emperors a place to belong. Scientific expeditions jumped 1,000-fold between 1250 and 1300, allowing for vast improvements in Sloth technology. These new technologies were primarily focused on helping their human counterparts withstand the harshness of space, among other things. By 1310 AD, humans were finally able to safely travel the stars alongside their Sloth companions. And now, 1325 AD, the story of our people returns to the current day. Whether by intent or by chance, Talia's actions have been the catalyst for a dramatic evolution and merging of our people. Even today, though, some still understandably despise her, having read the stories of the suffering of their ancestors from the history books. Some of these frustrated people have formed a group that believes life in our cosmos will eventually go extinct as a direct result of our insatiable desire for a new species to meet and places to visit. They claim that eventually we will run out of new things to consume, and once that happens, we will simply waste away of our own volition. And since we will have irrevocably intertwined ourselves with all the great many species in our universe, they too will fall. While this may be unprofessional, as a respected member of the 4th generation of Emperor hybrids, I must make my stance clear. Here and now, on this broadcast, I publicly denounce such claims by these fear-mongering groups. We've seen time and time again that no matter how bad things get, life will always find a way to come back from the brink. I'm sure you thought as much. Life endures. It does not give up. Nor will humanity, the Sloths, or we hybrids. I'm sure the same goes for all the other wonderful species we'll soon meet as well. Which leads into our closing story, the launch date of the CF-27, featuring the first entirely Emperor hybrid crew. It was confirmed earlier today that they're aiming for a launch date of November 4th. The spaceship, meant to open up collaborative talks with other species the Sloths have previously discovered, has suffered from numerous delays and false starts. However, all sources point to them finally being ready to initiate the final launch sequence by then. The Sloths have prepared a detailed map of the most welcoming societies to visit first on their journey, in hopes of quickly making numerous alliances. Their itinerary is planned to take at least 10 years. Among the species they plan to visit are... As I write this final journal entry, I still struggle to come to terms with how drastically our world has changed in the past month. 32 days ago, I was having prandium at the inn, as usual. 31 days ago, I was running for my life. My entire village obliterated. Everyone I knew erased from existence. I had no idea what had happened. I was just focused on surviving, however possible. 30 days ago, I saw her flying in the air, far, far away. Talia, our savior. At first, she seemed to just be surveying the area. A moment later, though, without warning, she simply razed the entire village. Nothing was left standing. No one survived. The sounds of her attack mirrored those I'd heard just a day ago. Once she was done, she casually flew away, as if she had just performed a basic errand. Didn't even give her actions a second thought. I dropped to my knees in despair. Talia wasn't going to avenge my village's suffering. She was the one responsible for it. Why? What was her motive? Had I done something to anger her? Committed some unforgivable sin? For the next 20 days, I continued stumbling forward in the darkness filled with uncertainty and grooves alike, I somehow persevered. And then, 10 days ago, I witnessed something I'd never forget. Faye and Talia flying through the air, fighting one another. At first, they seemed evenly matched. Talia, however, was able to get the upper hand. She flung Faye to the ground, her rival's body cratering the area. Talia coldly drifted down to Faye's body, lifting her in the air by her throat. She covered Faye with some sort of bright energy and that was it. Faye was gone. I was so far gone with trying to process what I just seen that by the time I came to my senses, Talia had already left the area. Now that Faye had been killed, there was no one on the planet with a chance of standing up to Talia's reign of destruction. Realizing this, I became desperate, delusional even. I ran down the hillside, making my way to the crater, hoping to find anything really. Maybe Faye had escaped Talia's wrath and was hiding somewhere nearby. Maybe she left behind some sort of secret weapon to deal with Talia. No luck. After looking around for an hour or two, I had resigned myself to the fact that Faye was truly gone, and humanity was truly doomed. The stress and exhaustion from the last few weeks caught up to me all at once. I became dizzy, slumping to the ground, falling face first into a puddle of Faye's blood. Moments later, my dizziness was no more. In fact, my poor eyesight, the bad cough I had recently, that weak knee of mine, they were all fixed. My exhaustion was gone too. I felt fully rested, getting used to my new body. I stumbled out of the crater. Waiting for me at the edge of it was a small handful of people. 30, perhaps 40 at the most. They had been tracking Faye and Talia's fight. They told me they wanted to be sure there was no other option left, no way to defeat Talia before they enacted their final defense against her wrath. It turns out they discovered an out for humanity, a way for us to survive this homicide. I asked them to clarify. They asked me in return how much I knew about what had all been going on. I told them the truth. I knew nothing besides what I had seen. I still had no idea why Talia had turned on us. So, they filled me in about everything I'd missed. According to this group, just a few hours before she destroyed my village, Talia had delivered a speech to all members of the Spell Kingdom. After defeating Seaver, she said she spent a month to weigh the value of humanity's existence. She concluded that humans would eventually plague the universe, and that we serve no useful purpose. A moment after finishing her speech, she began destroying her own kingdom. Fire was killed almost immediately. The Salat's Emperor fought valiantly against Talia, their fight collaterally destroying an entire country. Within a few days, he too had fallen. Then there was Faye. Their fight lasted an entire 2 weeks, killing millions of innocent bystanders through the course of it. However, despite Faye being the overall better combatant, Talia's hatred was too strong. It fueled her Fragments' energy, making her unstoppable. That was the bad news. Now came the good news. The other reason they had arrived at the crater was to extract the blood spilled around the area. Apparently, Faye and Talia's blood contained microparticles of something unexpected. Nanomachines imbued with Fragments' energy. Millions of these tiny machines were present in just one drop of their blood. If the average person touched even a drop of it, they would become empowered with a small fraction of that overwhelming, terrifying power. The surviving onlookers had found out about this while the Emperor was fighting Talia. Out of chance or some sort of otherworldly force, these empowered empowered individuals congregated over the next few days. And that's when they hatched the plan. While none of us could even hope to defeat Talia, we could trick her, hopefully. The plan was to self-inflict biostasis on ourselves with the powers of the fragment energy within us. We would each find somewhere that would be normally fatal to humans and go into stasis there for a century, buried in the ground, frozen in an iceberg, hidden in a volcano's caldera, places Talia would never look for human life. It seemed like a sound plan, which was good, because it was the only viable plan. But this uncertainty over our survival is why I call this my final entry. Either it truly is the final annals of humanity, or it's the final story of an era when we still fear Talia's wrath. If Talia has truly ceased to be a threat by the time my stasis ends, I will continue my journal and document humanity's rebirth. But for now, I must pay a visit to the ocean, my home for the next century.
That dramatic final entry of the Wrath of Talia series was written by my direct ancestor, survivor number 41, the Wordsmith. An inspirational story for all of us currently watching this broadcast, of course. A story of success, of pride. After all, we survived. Despite being pushed to the brink of extinction, all of us exist, right here and now, because of the genius of our ancestors. From 122 people around the globe in 1000 AD to 4 billion of us in 2105 AD. And all of us are direct descendants of these heroes, imbued with Fragments' energy as they were. The Fragments weren't all they imbued us with either. No, no, no. They gave us the 3 ideals as well. Never give up, never let our guard down, and never, ever stop improving ourselves. None dare shirk those ideals, lest we ignore the warnings of survivor number 122, the last visionary. The last to enter stasis, a brave woman who risked her life to continue observing Talia's actions for as long as possible, in case things went awry. She was also the only one to see the departure, wherein Talia, assuming she killed us all, left our Earth. Thanks to reports we've gotten from our satellites, we know that she continues to fly through the cosmos, exterminating species after species. She is still out there. So, we must fortify our bodies, we must train our minds, and we must refine our technology, all to prepare for the eventual return of Talia, the Omnicider. If you elect me, Pigglestone V, I will not only ensure that our current ideals are kept, I'll do my best to get construction restarted on the Kuiper Belt defense perimeter. Yes, you won't see me letting such a valuable asset go to waste. Unlike my opponent, Grizzly II, a man of...
Greetings, the Celeste Emperor from Earth here. We wanted to extend our congratulations. You're the first one we've contacted. We're here to bring you back home. You're getting this message because we've been monitoring your behavior during the last week, and we've deemed you safe enough to return. However, it's been a while since you were forced to leave, hasn't it? So, to reacclimate you, and to consume the time until we arrive at your location, I'll cover the major events from the start of things until now. Soon after Talia had defeated Seaver back in 1000 AD, she went into seclusion. Faye ran the Spell Kingdom, but only for a month. Soon after she left without warning, we would soon find out the cause of her departure. Without anyone to rule over it, the Spell Kingdom fell into ruin over the next half year. Finally, Talia emerged from the shadows. People were furious with her for that. She didn't care. Instead, she demanded to know where her body was at. No one knew, as no one had seen her. Faye, or myself, since Faye's departure. This was because the three of us were halfway around the globe, carrying out a desperate plan. You see, this wasn't known to the general public, but during her time in the future, Talia had gained an intense hatred of humanity. Even more so, however, she hated the Fragments, the destruction they were capable of, and anything associated with them. That meant she wanted to kill Faye, and then myself, in that order. A potential sympathizer of the creator of the Fragments, another Fragments user, and one whose peoples made the glue that helped power the Fragments. Luckily, Faye had discovered Talia's plan early on. A man had approached Faye one night, insisting that she check a certain unkempt forgotten room in the castle. The man had no voice, and communicated purely with hand signs. To this day, we remain in the dark regarding both his true identity and how he knew what was inside that room. Please me to say this all, though. Inside that room were countless documents detailing Talia's plans to eradicate humanity. At first, things seemed hopeless. Only Faye had any chance of surviving a fight with Talia, and that was a big maybe. The rest of the world would have surely been destroyed. Luckily again, Faye had discovered something vital just a few days before coming to see Vi himself. Giving the average person a drop of her blood to digest would imbue them with a sliver of Fragments energy. It wouldn't make them as strong as her, but their reflexes, strength, and durability would increase 100-fold. Within the 11 months since she left the Spell Kingdom, Faye had managed to augment 1/20th of all humans in the planet. Faye had additionally convinced 50% of the planet's countries to ally with her. All it took was telling those countries that if Faye, Vi, and myself were defeated by Talia, then they would be next. Thanks to our preparations, Talia was quickly beaten back during her first skirmish with our collective forces. Talia retreated, realizing she had to approach things differently. Talia's new objective was to exterminate all non-augmented people, removing them as a potential threat down the road. She made an exception for anyone agreeing to join her side by being augmented by her. Almost overnight, anyone who wasn't part of Faye's alliance pledged loyalty to Talia out of pure fear. Using more primitive methods than Faye's, millions underwent the augmentation process within the next week. Then they all joined Faye's side instead. They saw her as a morally just, kind individual compared to Talia. Talia was furious. Within a week, she killed all the remaining non-augments in both armies. Humanity's numbers dropped drastically. While all this was occurring, Vi and I had been making our own contingency plans. Unbeknownst to Faye or Talia, Vi had built an underground village, filled with neutral mercenaries whom she had augmented herself with her advanced technologies. As for myself, I gained my own small group of non-augmented normal humans who wished to remain as pacifists. With Vi's help, I was able to fully restore my time manipulation technology, and thus I could keep my group invulnerable by shifting us all out of the normal flow of time if we were to encounter any danger. Both Vi's group and my own only made up 1/20th of the Earth's remaining population combined, but we were still extra unknowns for Talia to worry about. As for Faye, she considered us allies realization kicked in. She spent the next month observing Vi's mercenaries. A few times she'd throw out false alarms to them to see how they react. She wanted to see if Vi had any useful technology on hand that could flip the ice for her. When false alarms produced nothing useful, she escalated. She started blowing limbs off of guards to see if Vi would bring out something impressive. And they did. Now knowing what she wanted, she convinced a few of Vi's more morally questionable mercenaries to turn against her. She told them of how she was betrayed by Vi in the future, and how she wanted to betray her. The mercenaries retrieved that specific device that Talia had seen used on those guards she had injured. It could put people into a temporary stasis. With that, heavily injured troops could survive to get proper treatment. Once she got the device, she thanked the mercenaries who betrayed her. Then she killed them. She probably figured they'd betray her someday too. Talia then worked through the night to sabotage Faye's army using the device. The next day, nothing seemed amiss. Soldiers awoke from bed as normal. Until the explosions happened. Each of the explosions was large enough to take out an entire family. What Talia had done was turn Faye's people into living fragment energy time bombs. She put entire encampments in stasis from far away, making the perimeter alarms useless. Then using yet another primitive method, she injured herself, pouring a large amount of her blood into the mouth of one of the soldiers. She repeated this through the night, hitting as many encampments as she could handle, before passing out from blood loss. When the stasis wore off in the morning, the unlucky recipients of a mouthful of blood had no choice but to swallow the majority of it, hyper-augmenting them. The immediate buildup of energy would prove to be too much, and all that fragment energy had to go somewhere. So, the psychological effect was immediate. People left Faye's army in droves, unwilling to be the victim of another such event. Many brave soldiers still stuck with her. Despite this killer weapon, the war continued for another year after that. More destruction, more death, more damage to the planet. I realized that eventually, I would no longer be able to protect my contingent. I attempted to appeal to Faye and Talia both. Neither would hear. They were determined to finish their fight. So there was only one path left for me. Stopping this war at all costs, no matter how you might climb it up. I contacted Vi and told her my plan. She agreed to help. Her mercenaries had been helping Faye, but only because the surface was dominated by fighting. Without Faye's support, they'd never be able to get supplies on the ground. If my plan would result in a more peaceful life, Vi's people would happily back it. Vi and I began work on the device. It reminded me of our time in the future, when we tirelessly worked on a way to escape that erased timeline. Back then, it was simply to escape, self-preservation. Helping defeat Zero was just returning the favor I owed Vi. She rescued me from a potential eternity of drifting aimlessly in the empty void where it once was. Now things were different. This planet had become my home. I wanted to defend it. I wanted to keep humanity safe. After 2 months of hard work, it was complete. Once Talia and Faye were exhausted from their latest skirmish, I activated the device. It supercharged my defensive powers, allowing me to bubble every human on the surface. Then, I shot them all into deep space. Each person would only be able to escape asteroid, or even a spaceship, being augmented, they should be able to survive in space, of course. I hoped that by isolating them all from one another, time would temper their hatred. Eventually, once they've proven they changed, we could bring them back to Earth. But with that action, the only humans left on the planet were Vi and her mercenaries, as well as my own group. A decade has passed since that day. Talia and Faye never returned to Earth. They haven't appeared on our scanners. At the very least, they're far outside of our solar system by now. That's not important for now, though. What is important is your return. The collective remaining population of Earth has concluded that it's been enough time for most of the exiled to be brought back home, starting with you. Hopefully this message has reached you successfully. Otherwise, you're probably going to be fairly confused by the sounds you're likely now hearing outside of your residence. Yes, that's us. We've just arrived. Assuming you've been watching this message, we'll be expecting you shortly. Refusal isn't an option.
I don't think I need to think any more about this. Humans are a sinful plague, unsatisfied with just the Earth's resources. They'll eventually spread out and corrupt the cosmos with their filth. No matter how harsh the situation, they'll find a way to survive and devour all they touch. I witnessed that firsthand in the future. That's why I've decided it's my job to stop them. Permanently. I'll find a suitable place to relocate all non-human life to. And once that's done, I'll destroy the Earth. It's the only solution. But I don't have the firepower to ensure total extermination yet. The Salotst, however. Didn't take much to convince the Emperor to get a hold of his people for me. I just had to threaten to wipe out a few thousand humans. A week later, the other Salotst arrived. As soon as they've landed, I easily kicked them off their ship, taking it for my own. Thanks to my suit, I'm able to interface with the ship directly, so I should be fine without a crew. Which brings me to my first order of business, reconfiguring these ship log dates so they'll actually make sense. Much better. Now for the second order, taking the Salotst homeworld's weaponry for my own. I'm currently in a bit of a situation. Someone told me before that most Salotst ships need an Emperor as a navigator. Without one, you'll end up in a random corner of the galaxy in seconds with how fast their ships move. Or, in my case, you'll end up deep in hostile alien territory. How do I know it's hostile territory? Well, besides the alarms going off all over the place, there's also some alien ships that have been beating up the hull for a good bit. Luckily, though, everything's held up fine so far. The scanners say these aliens are called the Hot Crane Kill? Odd name, but sure. I deal with them personally, but I'm not pissed off enough to be able to last long enough in space for that. The ship's got far weaker weaponry than I thought, too. It's useless in a fight. Maybe I could... Oh, shit! They're boarding my... So apparently, these Hot Crane aren't fans of the Salotst either. Given my ship, it makes sense why they attacked me on sight. Once we realized we had similar motives, though, it only took a day for us to hammer out an alliance agreement. But that was just the start. Over the last week, thanks to Hot Crane connections, I've also allied with more than 20 other anti-Salot species. Despite their pacifistic culture, they'd surprisingly made quite a few enemies. Most of these other species had spent centuries without success, being unable to even scratch the Salotst homeworld's defensive barriers. In 5 days, I'll change all that. The Salotst will be clueless. I'm flying a Salotst ship, and my suit gives off similar wavelengths to their blue. All they'll see is a Salat ship with a Salatst on board. The homeworld should have no reason to refuse my docking request. Then, once I'm past the barriers, I'll set the ship's autopilot to drive straight into their local generator, as I jump out to deal secondary damage all around the area. Realistically, I'd only disable their defenses for a few minutes, but it'd be enough for the anti-Salatst Alliance's 20,000 plus ships to get through. After that, well... The plan went off without a hitch. In fact, it went off far better than we'd expected. The Salats were exterminated within hours. A large factor in our success was that I'd forgotten about when my suit came from. Regardless of anything else, I was attacking them with technology 2,000 years beyond their own. On top of that, there was Sieber's additions to the suit, plus the fragment powers embedded in me, plus... you get the idea. Honestly, thinking about it, I could have wiped them out solo. Which brought me to a realization. If not even the Salatst posed a threat to my weaponry, then maybe I should just... We should finally be done with assimilating the last of the Salat ships and supplies into our fleet today. The last 2 weeks brought about much discussion regarding our next target. We eventually decided on the Burr Noble, a species of 20-foot-tall giants, with half of them being brutish, single-headed warriors, and the others being manipulative, multi-headed scientists. It'll be a 2-month trip to their planet. Along the way, we're hoping to ally with any species who might hate these Burr Noble as much as we hated the Salatst. Then, once we get there, it'll be a repeat of what we did here. We'll raise the planet and buff our fleet with their resources. Our alliance will repeat this with each planet possessing highly intelligent life, until only our fleet species remain, reigning supreme over the cosmos. Or at least, that's what they think the plan is. The truth is, my allies are just as likely to ruin the cosmos as the Salatst were. All intelligent life desires to paint the universe in their own image, leaving no room for coexistence. But that's not a problem. If none can stand up to me, I'll have no problem erasing every sapient species before I return to Earth. Including my allies, of course. I'll keep them around for now to help out with the remaining species on our extermination list. But after that... well, okay, I might spare a few of them. Specific members of species. Not the whole species, I mean. Look, having experienced those weird machines, aliens, and everything else from the future, it's not like I'd still have super vanilla tastes, right? Some of these guys can do some really crazy stuff with their... Anyways, once I've erased literally everyone except humanity, and, my friends, I'll have countless weaponry and resources. Enough to finally squash that damn human resilience once and for all. Then, my mission will be complete. Lower life forms will be able to thrive for all eternity, without the threat of intelligent beings looming over them. If you disapprove, then do something about it. That's what I thought. Blame yourself for not advising me better. Now leave me be. I've got work to do. I'm pretty pleased with how the unified kingdom shaped up over these last few years. My subjects have become righteous, just individuals, worthy of praise and admiration as moral paragons. Don't get me wrong. Soon after I destroyed each of their kingdoms, these newly subjugated people were bitter, unjust, and crooked. Not entirely surprising, given that they were being forced to come under our new unified kingdom's banner since they had nowhere else to go. But once I enacted my new justice precepts, giving them some power to rule as they saw fit, they mellowed out towards me, and each other as well. Here's how the system works. At the start of the year, each of the 40 shires votes on who they believe is the most moral, just person amongst them. These office holders will then be teleported by me to individual judgment rooms, deep within the head castle. They're given a single, special order. At any time, for any reason, as often as they want, they can order me to execute someone from their shire. And I'll do it. No questions asked. For the remainder of the year, each of these office holders will carry out these judgment calls at their own discretion. They won't be allowed to leave for their own safety, but each room is stocked with whatever they might require to live in comfort for their year in office. Now, you might be wondering why they would choose to execute anyone. It's because if during their reign more than 20% of people in a shire are affected by crime directly or indirectly, I will execute almost everyone in that shire, including the office holder. Thanks to the fragments, I'm able to read people's thoughts and feed them into a holographic visualization of that shire for the office holder. Yes, I know I could use this to simply deal with the crime rate myself. However, that wouldn't be justice. These people needed to figure out how to regulate themselves. I won't be around forever. There's a good handful of extra rules to this system, too. For example, what if a member in a shire causes trouble in another shire in an attempt to protect their own shire or raise another one's crime rate? If that happens, then the attacked shire is protected from what would have been a raise in their crime rate, and the attacker's shire is executed nearly in full. What if the office holder goes axe crazy and executes numerous subjects of theirs, you ask? That's fine, but a lower population would mean individual crimes carry more weight. A risky choice indeed. Regarding defections, people are allowed to defect from their shire and join a new one. They can only do this at the start of the year, though, and they must agree to be a dual citizenship member of both shires for that year. This ensures no one except those with enough bravery and outstanding moral values will take the risk, which will strengthen already upstanding shires. It also ensures that shires with poor moral values will quickly force themselves out of existence through the corrupt, selfish actions of their own irreputable citizens. Finally, you'll notice I said almost everyone earlier. There is one single group of people exempt from the execution rule. As food and raw materials are things needed by all, the masters of those crafts are subject to their own collective system to prevent execution of anyone creating such things. So, 1% of each shire is allowed to relocate as they please, and their actions won't affect the crime rate of the greater population nor their given shire. However, these 1%ers are overseen by their own elected office holder, who represents all essential suppliers. Let me be clear, they do have their own crime rate index too, but it's applied only to their collective group, and that rate goes up regardless of location. Yes, that means that this extra subsystem could, in one fell swoop, execute everyone that creates essential materials. At the end of the day, though, the purpose of these rules are to help the people get to know one another, which in turn has 3 main benefits. The first being that each shire elects the most likely person to be a solid office holder. The second is that the office holder, once elected, thoroughly knows which individuals will be a problem and could risk everyone getting executed. And as a result of the second benefit, the third one comes into play. Since anyone in a shire can become the office holder, everyone within that shire should be on their best behavior, or else they might be singled out for execution soon after election day. The proof that this system works is in the statistics. While the first year's run was extremely rough, and the next few years were slightly bumpy, The last 3 years have ran very, very smoothly. In fact, this year is shaping up to be our first year without any Shires being wiped out. Everyone's been on their best behavior in hopes of accomplishing such a respectable feat. Yes, some have complained that stress-related diseases, emotional disorders, and anxiety in general has increased steadily since the Justice Precepts, but any system has unfortunate byproducts. I don't see them as a reason to stop the system, and I think with time, the percentage of people affected by them will dwindle as well. Oh, those 3? Given their individual circumstances, Faye, Vi, and the Solot's Emperor understandably had a negative reaction to the Justice Precepts. After what we'd been through together, however, I didn't want them to feel uncomfortable in this new world I'd set out to make. That's why I set up a special Shire solely for them, free of the system itself. Free because it was walled off and situated on the other side of the planet, so that their unjust ideals couldn't taint my subjects. I hope in time they'll come to see the error of their ways. That's all you wanted to know? Alright then. You're welcome to come back and visit when you'd like, especially if you've got any more useful advice. For now, though, I need to return to my work. Good day. Hey, it's me, Talia. Don't worry, you're not hearing things. I'm speaking to everyone, collectively, through... Well, first, actually, let me explain what this is about. I'd like to apologize to all of you. I thought I was helping things, that I was bringing hope and optimism to humanity, that no matter what happened to you, you could have faith that things would turn out okay for you eventually. But everything I've done so far was a mistake. A very, very terrible series of mistakes, and I'm solely responsible for them. And that's why I'm contacting you all today. Not only do I owe you all this apology, I owe everyone an explanation too, for everything that's happened since I became your queen. Right, where to start? Okay, so soon after we defeated Seaber, Faye and I... No, that's not relevant. What matters is that I became your queen, and from the start, I was focused on a single, solitary goal for my reign. I wanted to surpass the worm's ideals, to show that humanity could believe in both themselves and each other, to show that we didn't need to be in a constant state of anxiety and despair. So, in an attempt to make you all feel secure, I just used the fragments to fix everything and anything that caused a problem for anyone. Natural disasters, lack of resources, medical ailments. Within a year, all the other kingdoms had acknowledged our prosperity and asked to join us. I accepted, of course. Things were going well. An optimistic outlook on life had become the norm across our new, merged kingdoms. I could have stopped right there. I should have stopped right there. But I didn't. I felt there was still more I could do to improve our way of life, to get rid of any other issues that might have ruined my vision for humanity. I really, seriously never meant for... Sorry. Apologizing more won't help anything. Better to just keep going. To the point, when I was in the future, sex was rampant. I saw how being so obsessed with it had driven most people there mad. I didn't want that for any of you. So I thought it best to discourage sexual behavior, if purely for pleasure, I mean. Most of you should remember feeling a zapping sensation, like a jolt going through your body from time to time. I was the one causing that. Anytime I saw someone flirting, cavorting, or blatantly displaying public affection, I secretly sent one of those jolts through their body. And nothing that would cause permanent damage, but it was strong enough that you didn't want it to happen again. After a few of those, people got the hint and stopped doing whatever disgusting, immoral acts they've been committing or were about to commit. They'd then go and be productive somewhere else. That was satisfactory to me. Slowly but surely, you all fixed yourselves. I truly believed my initial attempt at getting rid of one of humanity's sins had went perfectly. That's why I tried to get rid of another of your bad habits. Violence. It was still an issue. Despite everything being provided for them, some people just couldn't keep from harming others. I used the same methods with these offenders that I did with the sexual deviants, and at first, it seemed things were going fine. But people were still being murdered at the same rate as before. The jolt broke up fights before anything major could happen, so at first, I didn't understand how people were still getting killed. Everything came together, though, when I realized that all the dead bodies were being found exclusively inside homes. With that information, I set out to test a hunch by following a couple whom I'd zapped due to them groping each other's asses in public. Sure enough, they immediately resumed their deviancy as soon as they'd arrived in the safety of their cottage. None of you saw anything wrong with violent or sexual acts. All you did was realize the jolts couldn't hit you if you did your dirty deeds behind closed doors. Your habits didn't change. On top of that, you didn't even contemplate why you were being jolted. And that was my fault. I should have came up with a better, clearer way. That wasn't what I regretted the most. That moment came when I realized why none of you contemplated any of this. My protection had created a safety net in your minds. Anything that brought you pain or suffering, you thought you could safely ignore because, hey, Talia will fix it eventually, right? Talia wouldn't put us in danger. Talia wouldn't let us be harmed. I robbed you all of your sense of self-preservation. Any attempt I could have made to restore it would have been ignored. There was no danger I could threaten you with that you consider me incapable of dealing with. So I tried going to the Celeste Emperor, hoping he could use his technology to rewrite your brains to have a clean slate. There was a problem. Apparently, at some point, Vi had lost faith in my actions and had left the kingdom. No one knew where she'd went. And without Vi's help, he couldn't power up his tech to a level that could safely mind wipe you all. Getting help from the Emperor was a dead end. Reluctantly, I then asked Faye for help, hoping that I could chain my powers with hers to have an effect on your situation. But she refused to help. Unsurprising, given that she's wanted the throne ever since a disagreement we had in policies. Her only response was to tell me she hoped I got kicked out for screwing up this bad. I'd exhausted all my options at this point. All I could do was watch, as you kept putting yourselves in dangerous situation after dangerous situation without any regard for your own lives. Sure, I saved as many of you as I could. It was a losing battle. The blind optimism in the populace only continued to spread. I had to do something drastic to reset the status quo. I had to stop helping. Ironically, it was the only way I could help. By removing that safety net, you'd regain a sense of fear, of self-preservation. It was a choice made too late, in many ways. You've lost colleagues, neighbors, friends, and family members thanks to my choices. But it did fix things. It's been years since I've stopped helping, and as a result, you've mostly returned to normal. However, to make sure none of you ever have to deal with my choices again, I'm removing myself from leadership, effective immediately. I've been talking to Faye in recent days, and she's happily agreed to replace me. No matter what choices she makes during her leadership, we both agreed that they'd have to be better than mine. Once she's taken the throne, I'll just offer support from the background when Faye needs me to. Otherwise, I'll be fairly hands-off. I do still believe in my cause, though. I believe humanity can rise above their petty desires to utilize themselves in better, more productive ways. I believe that we should be a better version of the worm. Their ideals weren't wrong, they were just poorly implemented. I'll still see to making that future a reality as best I'm able. And I won't make the same mistake twice.
I've done it. I changed our future. It's 3000 AD, and yet there's no worm, no wars, no violence. A utopia. That's what I made for my people. Now, finally, I can... Oh, it's you again. I could tell you didn't expect me to still be here. Must have been pretty sure things would have just sorted themselves out when you left back then. But nope. I made good on my creed. I cultivated a system where... Can't stop wondering about how I got out, can you? Well, sure. Why the hell not? I owe you one anyways. Likely be the last time I'll get to talk to someone of our status in a cordial manner. That's kinda nice too. So back then, I'd just lost to Talia and her cohorts. While I was exhausted, they took the chance to seal me away by forcing me into biostasis. With that done, Talia spent the next year racking her brain trying to figure out an alternate way to keep the future from repeating itself, to prevent the worm from forming, while shunning my original plan. Nothing she came up with was viable, of course. Eventually, she retreated into a deep, desperate, depressive state, unable to cope with her failure to find a solution. I think it was around then that you left. Too bad you didn't stick around, huh? 'Cause right after your departure, she realized the truth. My plan was the only viable one. That same day, without telling anyone else, she released me. Looking away from me in shame, she told me that as long as I did what I'd first set out to, I'd get no opposition from her. She left without saying anything else. Talia had given up. She was harmless, defeated, hollow. I could trust she wouldn't get in my way. Those other three, however, I dealt with against her. I sealed Faye away in biostasis, using a similar technique to the one they'd used on me. Additionally, I opened a channel within her imbued fragments aura so that I could siphon it from later use. Of lesser value were that Ember and Vi. After spending a night cleansing her recursive virus from my set of fragments, I set out to execute them. But, thanks to that single-minded delay on my part, they'd already relocated off planet. Not an issue. They were no longer a threat at that point. With no one left to cause any issues, I got to work. A month later, I was able to convert the throne room into a new fragmenting engine. For its power source, the siphon I'd set up on Faye worked just fine. For the second time, clad in my fragment suit, I entered the engine. This time, though, it was on my own terms. Testing the waters, I redirected myself to 5 days later. No issues. 10 days later. 30 days. No issues. Redirected myself to different spots around the globe. No issues. It worked flawlessly. Now, for all eternity, I could instantly appear anywhere in both space and time. Additionally, so long as I kept the populace at this rudimentary level of technology, no one could harm me or the engine. I didn't let myself get careless, however. Before enacting global control, I decided to make sure there were no loopholes or issues I overlooked. So, having already prepared my list of regulations long ago, I distributed them to the members of the Spell Kingdom that same day, to use them as a test group of sorts. With things in place, I flew back to the engine and entered it, re-emerging 1 year later. Some regulations had been obeyed, others had not. Punishments needed to be enacted. I repeated the process. Once a year, I would appear to enforce my regulations with no exceptions. After a decade, the populace realized things that even the slightest misstep would invoke my wrath. 20 years after starting this cycle of events, none of the spell kingdom dared to step out of line. My regulations had been burned into their very cycle. Satisfied, I went back 20 years into the past and repeated the entire process again. This time at one of the neighboring kingdoms. And then again at yet another kingdom. And again, then again. After all was said and done, the 5 kingdoms had been successfully converted. While this was all going on, though, every so often throughout the different time periods, I would see Talia wandering aimlessly, far away in the distance. At the end of the 100 years I'd spent to ensure the kingdoms would obey my regulations, I saw her yet again. This time I beckoned her over, wanted to ensure she wasn't plotting something in secret against me. Surprisingly, however, she brightened up in my presence. Said she was impressed at how much violence, wars, and general negativity had went down since she'd freed me. This wasn't an act. She was truly grateful. As she should have been, of course. Our conversation confirmed I had no reason to worry about her. Leaving in silence, I flew back to the engine, ready to take my regulations global. Less than 1,000 trips later, the entire world had been brought to heel. My regulations had become part of the human experience. I was confident that humanity would be saved, their future ensured. Until Vi returned with those damn sellouts a decade later, that is. Those aliens smashed through my engine without hesitation, lasers pumping. A hard change from the pacifists they used to be. Vi must have painted a real vicious picture of me for them to go this overboard in just 30 years. I'll be the first to admit that things seemed hopeless. Despite numerous upgrades I'd made over the years, the fragment suit was still partially Selot's tech. They were able to disable some of its functionality, but not the entire suit. It was enough to weaken my abilities by a good amount, though. Despite that, I refused to give up. Humanity had to survive. The planet had to survive. The Celots would never allow me to rebuild the engine. So the only option left was erasing them. A years-long war began. I made them take heavy casualties, but eventually I whittled my suit's defenses down. Once I was exhausted, Vi and the last of the Celots cornered me as they initiated the process to put me back into biostasis. All was lost. Until out of nowhere at the last moment, a beam of energy erased them all. Nothing remained. The Celots had been made extinct. It was Talia. She'd come to my aid. She believed, stronger than ever, that my regulations were the way to go. She didn't help me at first, as she thought I had it under control, but when she saw I was about to be defeated, well, due to her actions, no other invaders ever came near our planet. We became known as the species that had wiped out the Celots, feared by all. Things had worked out even better than I had planned, and I had Talia to thank for it. For a time, shocking even myself, we became romantically involved. Likely because we were the 2 strongest beings in the universe. We had no peers, no one to relate to, truly alone. We rebuilt the engine together, and I got back to work with my plans. For 160 years, I appeared every 20 years around the globe, simultaneously, for a single day to enforce things. Then, I'd jump back to the present. I'd secured the future up to 1300 AD. I started only appearing every 50 years. Talia had begun demanding that I stop jumping to the future so much, assuring me humans would be fine now. The motive was for us to spend more time together. Despite being near immortal, I was still human. After so much success, I'd become lax. Allowed myself some selfishness. Become degenerate. I stopped going to the future. Lost track of my goal. Lost track of myself. A year passed by in real time. I decided to live among the citizens, fixing problems in the here and now. Grew crops, watered the fields, repaired houses, and saved lives. Entirely without effort, thanks to the fragments. But one day, as Talia and I were looking out over this kingdom we nourished, it hit me. This dependence on my fragments I'd created and the overabundance of resources I'd given the people. I was undoing all my hard work. If this kept up, people would come to inspect this, having anything they wanted, whenever they wanted, however they wanted it. The planet would be ruined. The world would form again. I knew what I had to do. I walked into the now defunct engine room, cleaned the dust out of the vents, and started it back up. Talia pleaded with me, knowing full well what I was about to do. Without a word, I put her in biostasis. I started my campaign back up again, appearing every 50 years. By 2000 AD, to humanity, I was on a level beyond human, a natural force of the universe. I only needed to appear every 100 years from then on out until 3000 AD. That year is special to me, for obvious reasons. I'd always planned to move my core existence to that era, assuming security meant the safety, of course. And so, here I am. By now, I should only need to appear once every 500 years. Maybe every 1,000 years eventually. In any scenario, as I said earlier, I've established a utopia. I've accomplished my first goal, which means I need to turn my attention towards my second, final goal. Dealing with your issue. Yeah, I've seen everything. I tapped into the river a few centuries ago. I'll be more than ready to deal with them with a
After I took over, I promised I'd make things better. I gave countless speeches about ending suffering, violence, all of it. But no, wars are still common. Death, even more so. I said so much, yet accomplished so little. Which is why today, I've decided to take drastic measures. If traditional methods didn't work, then this should. I did it. I fixed them all. It just took removing their sense of pain, emotionally and physically. No one's had any desire to harm others for a good long while now. Sure, people still, accidentally burn themselves from time to time, but safety protocols can only do so much. Overall, humanity's got a peaceful, pacifistic life to look forward to from here on out. I may have been misguided. A small handful of people revolted earlier today, storming the castle. Their weapons were no threat to me, of course. What did worry me, though, was the painful expressions they were making. I hadn't seen anyone look like that in a long, long while. Once they realized they couldn't do anything against me, they cooled off. I let the group go back home, unpunished. It's been hours since then, and all I can see when I close my eyes are their contorted, anguished faces. I had Vi examine and interrogate one of the men who'd attacked me. Turns out my pain blockers weren't as comprehensive as I thought. Apparently, his group missed being able to experience pain. They missed it so much, in fact, that their nervous systems overloaded my pain blockers. That's why their their faces were so contorted. Vi told me that after being painless for so long, such a rush of sensations would have been excruciating. Understandable why they went crazy then. That's good news, though. It means all I need to do is block their pain sensation even harder. Problem solved. Problem not solved. They're rebelling more and more. Only 3 weeks passed between the last 2 attacks. Vi says that their tolerance to my treatments has become so strong by now that any further treatments would lead to certain death. She refuses to help me with this any further as a result. I can't give up on them, though. There has to be a solution to this. That makes 5 attacks in one day. Over 1,000 casualties. Every one of them due to experiencing too much pain. I think Vi said the actual condition was neurogenic shock, but that's too clinical for me. It makes it feel like all those people are just numbers on an ever-growing tally of deaths. They deserve better than that. Which is why for years I've tried so many methods to get them to live out peaceful, enjoyable lives. But they've rejected everything. Got no other choice. I'll visit the other 3 tomorrow. Vi, Faye, and the Emperor all refused to leave the planet initially. I expected them, though, so I gave them an ultimatum. I felt terrible doing so, but I couldn't have them screwing up the integration that was to come. They'd only bring chaos to it. Finally, after hours and hours of stonewalling them and standing my ground, they gave up. Long after they'd vanished from sight, I kept staring at the spot I'd seen them at last. And now, it was time to get to work. There was this local farmer that would deliver milk to me a few times a week. Real humble guy. Never felt threatened by my status or powers. He arrived at my room about an hour ago with today's delivery. I opened the door, looked him square in the eyes. He'd be the first. Using the fragments, I just grabbed his DNA. Then I rearranged it, stripped it of useless data, made the flesh uniform throughout, added connective tissue on the edges, transformed his very being into something entirely new, yet still human at its core. As long as I was touching him, his human core could communicate its thoughts to me and mine to him. Honestly, I'm incredibly happy with how well it went. I'm sure Vi would be disgusted, but she'd also be really impressed with how well it had worked out. Can't rest, though. Still got a few 100 million left to rework. However, I might need a way to, adjust multiple people at once. I did it. Today, I truly fixed them all. Finally, every entity within the collective of humanity has successfully expressed that pacifistic intent comprises the majority of their emotions. Any errant animosity that pops up within a single given entity is now able to be instantly diluted and subsequently wiped out. Sure, the first 20 years after connecting the reworked whole of humanity was chaotic. All those people constantly screaming inside their own minds, full of negative emotions. I didn't blame them, of course. Anyone would have been disturbed by what I'd put them through. Jellified, flattened into a thin paste, and then merged with the rest of humanity. I still feel awful about that. I always will. But after countless applications of the Salat sign language's calming forms, I was able to reduce the violent emotions present in the collective. With time came the reduction and eventually nullification of all negative emotions. Now, these hundreds of millions have nothing left to fear. They can live out the rest of their lives in peace and joy. I've added a few quality of life features to the collective. They now have improved photosynthetic capabilities, which allow them to be less dependent on the planet's resources for sustenance. This should allow the planet to exist indefinitely.
Over the last few years, I've noticed my energy, my life force, starting to wane. In an attempt to remain intact for as long as possible, I've began osmosing chemical energy from each individual within the collective. I'm only taking a small amount, around 100 millionth of each person's energy. The effect on each individual should be practically non-existent. But combined, it was enough to sustain me. With my life force holding steady, I should be able to protect the collective from outside threats indefinitely. Oh, right. Yesterday was the 5,000th anniversary since the Salotst last raided us. Or anyone else feeling a bit tired.
Ah, they're back. Means I don't get much time to make this. So, let's get to it. According to the history books, everything ended up this way because of that big battle between Sieber and Talia. Figure it'd be best to start there. After she won, she'd had enough of killing others, causing death, wars, all that violent stuff. Didn't want to harm a hair on anyone's head, and she got bent on making sure no one else did either. But after a year of ruling everyone with her fists of peace, Faye, Vi, and the Selodst Emperor thankfully intervened. They agreed that if Talia really wanted peace, she should let the Emperor rule instead. His people had been writing the book on pacifism long before we humans had the concept. Just one problem. Putting a demonic-looking blue alien dude in power during that point in history would have guaranteed a war. So Vi, Faye, and Talia became figureheads, while the Emperor guided the kingdom and its people from behind the scenes. A century later, those three had died, and another set of figureheads took their place. When they died, the cycle continued. But throughout the years, the Emperor stayed in power thanks to an extended lifespan. Bit by bit, he revealed himself to his subjects. First, as a shadowy silhouette, next as a pair of glowing eyes. Around 1450 AD, himself in form. People had grown to be okay with Selodst and aliens in general by then. Most of them already knew he was the real one. With such a warm reception, the Emperor felt safe to have his fellows visit. The Selodst test party arrived around 1500 AD. It went good, of course. Who wouldn't want to welcome this kind when it helped out kind so much? Human tech, medicine, quality of life got a boost from the Selodst over the next 700 years. In return, Selodst used the Orc as a tourist stop. And then, after what had been over 1,000 years of peace, there were no remember Talia's fight with the sea. Turns out, if you got advanced enough equipment, you can detect fragment energy usage from really far away. Quickly found out they weren't like the Selodst. Within seconds of the burn open land, they began capturing and killing countless people. We tried to negotiate with them. They plenty to call Terra Australis in response. Next, we tried to plead mercy, asking them to stop slaughtering us. Some people even said they'd willingly work for them as partners. Their response? Vaporizing New Solodnia and turning the democratic states of the Crown into a war zone. Yep, they only had one thing they cared about. Total and complete domination. Zealots tried to protect us as best pacifists could. But they didn't accomplish much besides stalling the over. Realizing we were a lost cause, thanks to the pacifism they recognized. Every Zealot beside our Emperor retreated to their homeland. Told us they'd return after a resupply and repair. This war would be over much sooner than that. Those Zealots did. The Emperor, to his credit, stuck around and slowed him down for a few months. He didn't live much longer. Defending us solo took its toll on him. His efforts bought us time to strategize any remaining possibilities for victory. And as a result, humanity was equally split four ways. Four groups. Four takes on what the right thing was to do. One-fourth of us willing to become enslaved and stop fighting entirely. Those who believed that if they give up, over time, they could convince the brother to be our allies, friends, idiots. The second fourth ended up leaving, using the Emperor's personal transport, went to autopilot for the Zealots' homeworld. They'll be safe, though. It's kind of like they'd be animals in a zoo. No. Third group were those yahoos that thought they could force evolve themselves into some singular, collective, spiritual thing that would float around space. Now, credit where credit's due. They did become that singular, collective, spiritual being. But I'm pretty sure they became just that. They probably don't got free will. Last group, idiots, truthfully, stayed behind to fight. It was a fight we were unlikely to win. We still had hope. See, on his deathbed, the Emperor told us to stockpile of weapons and lock the way to the last resort. We hoped we could stay unused. Last seconds, though, I realized, as it wasn't his, the power of those Zealots' weapons he left us did some real damage to the world. Then we lost. The truth is, those of us who stayed to fight, rebels, were only a few 100,000 strong to them, against millions of them. Plus, with the Burnoble being over 40 feet tall and weapons to match their proportions, it would take 10 to 20 of us to deal with one of them. Simply don't have the numbers. Managed to defend back then. Last night's battle actually wiped my entire district. I'm the only survivor. Here we're getting closer. I'll try to do what I can, just to stick it to him one last time. I hope it was worth making this record of how we, humanity, ended up this way. And maybe someone will listen to this someday. Hell, maybe we'll even...
Here's the summary. The chump screwed up. Big time. And you know what? So did I. I could have stopped all of this if I'd just been less fearful. Way back when, in 1000 AD, she became the new queen of the Spell Kingdom right after beating up Seber. She made me her second in command, which I settled for. That's where the turning point was. If I would have challenged her and taken the throne for myself, I'm sure things could have been all right. From the moment we got back to the past, though, something felt off about her. It creeped me out, so I wanted nothing to do with it, or her. Found out later that her weird attitude was because she felt guilty about all those people she killed by changing the future. Also, apparently she did some stuff in the future that made her question some things. Doesn't sound like that'd help her mental stability either. She claimed that she was worried about overpopulation, didn't want us to run through our resources and end up like the worm. Personally, I think she was just looking for an excuse to do what she did. Whatever her actual reason, the chump, being a chump, exerted her powers in the stupidest way possible. She used the fragments to destroy humanity's capability to process any emotion, except for one: violence. Her idiotic logic was that if everyone was just killing each other, then we'd never hit overpopulation. Nor would we destroy our resources. She went all in on this, declaring that all murder, injury, and so on is legal. Furthermore, anyone left alive after a year would inherit the planet alongside her. With that, the global battle royale started. Millions died. The obvious fail here was that when it comes to wars, weapons get made to fight those wars, and that means more resources getting used up. Sure enough, production of weapons, armor, and medical supplies immediately jumped up big time. The resistance against this global madness, Vi, the Celod's Emperor, and myself, we were the only three immune to the emotional itinerary. I was fine due to the fragment energy embedded in me. Vi was okay due to being a homo cumulatus, and the Emperor is, well, an alien. The Emperor, however, quickly gave up, signing off on humanity as a species of warmongers. He'd altered the time travel device Vi and he had made, causing it to move him through space instead of time. I've never once blamed him for leaving. As for Vi, she could heal the injured physically, but she couldn't heal their minds. Talia hadn't damaged their emotions, she'd erased them. I was so focused on trying to bring Talia down. And after month, year after year, I never succeeded a single time. A decade passed, and more, the population dropped. The battle royales continued. Still, Talia had become glorified worldwide. They loved the life that she'd enabled for them. Not like they had the capability to desire anything else. Of course, technology for weaponry and armor had become thousands of years more advanced than it should have been. The damage to the planet's resources was violence, fighting, aggression, killing. All of it sickened me by this point. I still continued my fruitless attempts to stop this insanity. I hadn't given up. Then, one day, I requested a meeting. We hadn't seen each other in a few years. Turns out she developed a device to end this once and for all. The device would finally, like Talia had, and Vi as well. We both agreed her sacrifice was worth it, though. Anything was worth this. My role in this plan was simple. I had to infuse her device with as much fragments energy as I could muster. Vi would then use her tech to teleport herself onto Talia, with the device in tow, and activate it point blank. With the help of a few of Talia's bugs that we turned, it only took a week to install a conduit Vi could use to teleport herself into Talia's chambers. The plan went off without a hitch. Vi and Talia were victorious. We'd saved the world. Without Talia's influence, I would finally be able to turn things around. That's it. Remember, these people were permanently poor. Not even my own fragments energy can bring back what didn't exist anymore. Instead, after Talia's death, things became even more insane. With Talia being killed by Vi the Scoundrel, it turned Talia into a martyr of mythological proportions. Humanity's bloodlust became even stronger. The battle royales had been abandoned. Now it was simply all killing all the time. The population started dropping exponentially. Ironically, around this time, the combatants started building and donning worm-inspired armor and weaponry. This was because of what Talia had told them. She described the worm as the strongest humans ever. So, why not mimic them, right? That wasn't the most ridiculous thing that happened, though. Soon after Talia's death, faced with a thirst they couldn't quench, the most proficient killers ended up making something, well, deranged. Like to was being built with little resources still available, were janky to say the least. It took a full 20 years in real time to grow a clone. During that time, the clone would be implanted with all the muscle memory and life experiences of the original person. Those ultra-skilled killers, unsatisfied with everyone else, cease killing until their legions of clones would be ready to go to battle with them. About the only good thing to come of all this was that the population reduction had slowed down slightly. Most importantly, however, was that it had opened up a new, yet terrible way to fix humanity's problems. With it being such a horrible act, though, I refused to do it. I told myself I'd find some other way. It only took 2 years for me to change my mind. It was at my limits, past them, really. I'd realized that there was no other hope, no other way to fix things. So I set my terrible plan in motion. You see, at this point, all of humanity had small bits of fragments energy within their bodies. I tapped into this collective energy, and combined with the much larger pool of my own fragments energy, I wiped out all the myelin in their bodies.
Wait, what do you mean you don't believe me?
Yeah, I knew what myelin was. After Vi passed, I researched all the advanced science books she left behind when I had a chance, bit by bit. I was hoping to find a way to reverse the emotional tampering the chunk did. I never found anything, obviously. Anyways, the whole myelin erasure thing was the most damage I could do with what little power I had left after all these years. And it worked. Without myelin, all that fragment-boosted energy in their bodies was no longer contained. It ricocheted around, frying their bodies from the inside out. I successfully ended the battle royales by ending everyone else. All that was left was to finish the plan. I stumbled over to one of the cloning chambers and let it grab my data. The cloning process started up. Then I started up another chamber, and another, and another. All the humans I'd killed, any clones of them were doomed to have the same lack of emotions they did. Cloning them would be pointless. So the only hope I could give humanity was to just keep cloning myself. I was the only sane human being left. Somewhere, far in the back of my mind, I felt disgusted by cloning myself. The last bits of my ego couldn't take that I was no longer unique. I instructed the clones to build on each other's knowledge, to continue researching possible ways to not need to rely on the cloning chambers. Not too long after the second wave of clones, I passed away. All that fighting had taken its toll. I didn't even make it to 100 years old, despite Vi once telling me the fragments should have kept me alive well into my early 200s. From what you've told me, though, they eventually succeeded. It took them a few hundred years, but they came up with an alternative solution to survive. Each of the clones was assigned an energy generator that pulled energy from another place in the universe. Converting this energy into raw fuel for the fragments, they were able to live indefinitely. You said some of them lived well into 10,000 AD, right? With all of them having my memories, though, they had secondhand experience of the brutality humans were capable of. So, despite Fey humanity continuing to exist for a long, long time after, they avoided interacting with other alien species to the best of their ability. They were, at their core, afraid of ever harming another species, another organism ever again. I'll always regret not challenging her. If I'd just done that, things would have turned out so much better. We could have all been
Yeesh, calm down, would you? I'm not going to be able to remember things clearly if you're staring daggers at me like that. Okay, that's better. I'll start at the beginning. After we defeated Seabar, it only took me a week to realize that I had, issues. Namely, that I had a lot of pent-up bloodlust, and just plain old regular lust, too. But I couldn't go around killing innocent civilians, and my violent aura scared off any would-be romantic partners. Without any outlets for these urges, I knew I'd go insane before long. I knew I wasn't fit to rule at that point. I'd need to find a replacement. So I came up with what was a good idea at the time. When you get desperate, sometimes you make stupid choices. To have enough free time to find said replacement, as well as keeping the kingdom safe from, well, me, I decided to vacate the throne. The day after vacating, I started traveling around the Spell Kingdom to scout out my replacement. I wouldn't take just anyone, though. Oh no, I had a whole convoluted process in my head for it. First, I'd seek out the enemies of the kingdom, mainly assassins, but also rogue warriors, bandits, people like that. Second, I challenged them in battle, and if they could survive my initial onslaught, I'd test them in an entirely different way, with sex. Once I'd mounted... You're doing that whole staring daggers thing again. Relax, seriously. As I was saying, once I'd mounted them, I'd do my best to get them to come as fast as possible. Given my breadth of experience from the future, many came almost instantly. Finally, if anyone passed both tests, I'd offer the throne to them. If they declined, I'd kill them. My intent was that if someone who met my qualifications became king, then the values they'd imprint on the kingdom would be ones I held in high esteem. The strong, independent will, the tough, well-maintained body, bloodlust to fuel the extermination of his enemies, and of course, actual lust for, obvious reasons. All of these were the opposite ideals of the lazy, sheepish, wimpy Puritans that the world was full of. No, I refuse to allow my kingdom to resemble the future I'd seen at any cost. That said, I did have an ulterior motive or two. No point in trying to hide it from you, I figured. If the kingdom were to be indoctrinated in such a way, it would have increased my viable sparring partners and potential escorts dramatically. And so, I searched. I searched. I searched. For 50 years, I tested thousands of men of ill repute. Few survived the first trial I put them through. Even fewer survived my second attack. Throughout the decades, only 4 men qualified. The first 3 refused the throne, so I refused their lives. The fourth, however, accepted. As soon as he did, it was like the bloodlust I'd had coursing within me just vanished. All that was left was regular old lust. Love. Part of what I started this whole convoluted quest was because I wanted to have more people to fight. But now, after so many opponents, I was done with that stage of my life. Thankfully, the man who became king was actually fairly benign. He only needed a chance to turn his life around, and I had given him. Like me, he was sick of constantly fighting. Although in his case, it was to survive, not due to any sort of pleasure he drew from it. Things were peaceful for the next year. No fighting, no wars, no crime, nothing bad at all. And then they showed up. Vi, Faye, and the Emperor, with an army behind them, ready to destroy our kingdom. And it was purely due to a misunderstanding. I mean, I get why they assumed what they did, but they still screwed up. Apparently, back when I vacated the throne, the 3 of them left the continent, with the intent of forming a contingency plan against me. When news reached them that I'd found a new ruler, they put said plan into action, with the assumption that anyone I deemed worthy enough would have likely been Seabar 2.0 morally. The plan itself?
augmenting thousands of people with faux fragments made by Vi and the Emperor, and derived from phase fragment-altered genes. These newly boosted soldiers have the ability to drain Fragments' energy from a true Fragments user, namely myself. That's why as soon as they'd gotten inside the castle walls, they went straight for me. Given the circumstances, I was sorely out of practice. I didn't put up much of a fight. Vi made it to the throne room shortly after they'd sucked all the energy out of me. At first, she looked like her usual smug self, but then a look of horror hit her face. I'd find out later that she assumed I would have expended most of my energy defending the kingdom, so that by the end of things, each soldier would have only gotten a small amount of my fragment energy. Instead, these guys were bursting with energy. Enough energy to threaten the entire world. To make matters worse, there was another factor. Remember those deviants and criminals I was targeting so many years ago? When word got out about me cleaning the place up, many of them fled to other areas. Guess who this faux augment army mostly consisted of? Vi immediately knew that these guys would have no scruples about making good on that world-dominating potential they now possessed. Luckily, Vi was Vi. She had a contingency plan for this contingency plan. In the event the soldiers turned on Faye, Vi had made a device to permanently disable all Fragments users in a large area. Why she didn't start her assault with that was beyond me, but Vi is Vi. Anyways, Vi activated the device with the help of the just-arrived Faye and Emperor channeling energy into it. It only took a minute or two to fill the device with small, compressed, crystallized chunks of fragment energy from not only their entire army, but Faye as well. With the collective Fragments energy left on Earth condensed into this one little device, the Emperor did what he does best. He froze it in time. Then, after he did some movements with his hands, the device suddenly shot upwards into the sky. After a few seconds, I couldn't see it anymore. That was a month ago. Given the speed it was going, I wouldn't be surprised if it's exited our solar system by now. That's it. That's the story. I get it. We screwed up. The world would have benefited lots from fragment energy, but now it's gone forever, and it's all our faults. You don't have to remind me. At least humanity's been saved from the worst-case scenario of ever being ruled by tyrants like they were with the worm, though, right? What's that look for? You know, you could tell me what's coming in the future. If it's that bad, at least we could prepare for it then. You're just giving up on us? Really? Fine. Go off and do whatever it is you've been doing these last 50-some years. I'm sure we'll do fine without